Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Barnes. This is the 78, a podcast for stories from the 78, which is my website where I do all sorts of things in and around Chicago and kind of anywhere I go. And it's been an interesting week because an organization is putting together a river swim. And when I say river swim, I mean the Chicago River. And the Chicago River, if you've never been to Chicago, historically has been not great in terms of wanting to spend any time in the water. Only in the last probably 30 years or so, 40, they have cleaned up the river because it used to be kind of like this industrial dumping ground when the city was, younger, let's just say. And over the years, they've cleaned up the river. The river walk has been something that has been added to Chicago about 15 years ago, and it's amazing. The river now is fantastic, but people have this sense of the river of like Bloody Creek, Bubbly Creek on the south side because it was near the area of the stockyards where they used to dump stuff into the water and it was gross. And, it's a river in a major city. It's as clean as the Hudson River in New York City or the river in Boston and the whole thing. So it was big news that they approved a river swim, and it's not just a small river swim, it's a large river swim, and it starts right near the mouth of the river where it meets Lake Michigan. And if you don't know, the Chicago River flows backwards. It used to flow into the river, but it was so polluted that the river was flipped to flow out, so we weren't polluting Lake Michigan because that is Chicago's drinking water, and we sent the nasty down south to our friends in St. Louis and beyond, all the way out to the Gulf of Mexico past New Orleans. And that's why historically, when you grow up in Chicago, you didn't want to do anything with the river. You go by it certain days, it still doesn't smell all that great. Nonetheless, they're doing this river swim, and this river swim is going to be historic. And apparently, years ago, they used to swim in the river for recreation. I mean, one of the people that swam in the river when it was at its peak went on to like win the Olympics. He was in Tarzan. He was in Tarzan movies back in like the 20s and 30s. And this gentleman swam in the Chicago River and did his whole entire thing out there. People used to come to the riverfront, and this is when the river wasn't very clean, and it was just kind of a nasty riverfront. It was just like there. 100,000 people would come out and watch the river swims. It was a kind of like a mini tiny Olympic event, and people used to do this to qualify for the Olympics. So there's a story on Stories from the 78. I talked to the gentleman who is starting this. It's for a good cause. It's for ALS. And that is why they are doing the river swim, to raise money. You can either swim a mile or 2 miles in the Chicago River. And that is no small feat because the Chicago River, is kind of terrifying, if you've never been into it before, because you've heard all the stories. But the river is clean. They've done a great job keeping it clean. So nonetheless, that is one of the stories that I posted for Story from the 70. I wanted to give you some context. And throughout this week, I hung out with Rick Bayless. Rick Bayless, Topolobamba, and Frontiera Grill, among many other things that he's done in the city. It was Rick Bayless Day in Chicago. And I also qualified to be a lifeguard with the Chicago Lifeguards at the Chicago Park District. So we went through like a whole swim test. We go to the Ping Tom Park in their field house, and they have a pool. And Jackie, the reporter for CBS, and we like hung out, and we're like, should we do it? Should we do it? And then we like, what the hell? Why not? Let's do it. So we like hung out and did the swim test and got the brick and swam in the time allotted. And we got fancy shirts and the whole thing. And that was on CBS 2 Chicago. And if you're interested on what that looked like, you should go over to that website and check it out. It was a lot of fun. And it was pretty cool to see like what our Chicago lifeguards have to do to save us when, we've wandered out too far into the lake and, you need a little help getting back. It was a really cool opportunity and a lot of fun. And the Chicago Lifeguards, they do amazing work, and the Park District does amazing work. So if you want to be a lifeguard, you can go over to cbs2.com and you'll see the story about how to be a lifeguard. They pay pretty well, and they'll pay you to go to school. To learn, to learn how to swim. They'll give you classes to pass the whole thing. So it's worth the time and investment. You're looking for a summer job, and it's not just for kids. It could be people who are older, retired. They have plenty of those folks. So if you can swim, they don't care what age you are. If you can swim and you can help people, they want you. Another fantastic thing was on CBS, and I also did a little a YouTube short video, and I posted a story about the St. Regis and their new their new restaurant they have, Tradia. I can't think of the name. I'm gonna look it up now. Dita. That's the name of it. I can't pronounce it. But it's open at the St. Regis Hotel. I posted at storiesfromthe78.com. Also, it's at CBS. But what I wanted to talk to you about, though, specifically, was that the St. Regis is just it finally opened in full. The restaurants are open. We got to walk around and check this place out. It is fantastic. It is a true gem of Chicago. So much so that we went into the presidential suite. The presidential suite at this place, I'm talking it's over $20,000 a night to stay there. So we got a tour of that. If you go over to the site, it's like one of the first things we show. You get to see what $20,000 a night will get you in Chicago, and the views are spectacular. It's like right at the mouth of the river where Navy Pier is. Celebrities are the ones that stay there. They're I won't give out the name of the celebrity, but I'm talking like biggest of the biggest types of celebrities that will hang out there. And it's not just them. It's like, their crew of people, because it can seat or sleep about 10 people, I believe. But either way, very cool. But the highlight of the week, in my opinion, was hanging out with Rick Bayless at his restaurant, Frontera Grill. We were in the morning. He taught Jackie how he does the pecan pie that they make, and then empanadas, steak, all these other things. Jackie had a little mishap on the air with one of the cheese things, but you'll have to go over to cbs2.com to check that out. But one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically with Rick Bayless is I've worked in Chicago for 20 plus years and worked with Rick Bayless a handful of times over those 20 plus years. And he's never been anything but gracious and kind. And it happened again. We're in the restaurant. So we're there at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's early. A lot of these restaurants close at like 10 or 11 or midnight, when everybody gets out of there. And, Rick Bayless has got lots of things going on. He's got an empire to run, right? And he was gracious with his time, very sweet. He made this, he showed off the steak dinner that they have, along with the little sides that they offer up for the dinner, right? And we finish up with that hit on TV, and we're just sitting around. And, as Rick, in between takes, he goes off and sits down. And it's not that he's antisocial. He's just got a lot going on. So you can see that he's over there and he's gathering his thoughts and looking at things and just sorting it out. I do that on certain levels, but I don't run an empire. So if I did, I'd probably do the same thing he's doing, right? But then he gets up and he walks over, and they have the food that they did for the segment, right? We're in a restaurant. We don't ask for food because that's weird, right? People offer, we'll eat because we're TV people and that's what we do. So Rick he gets up and he walks over to the counter where the food is, and he starts cutting it up. And it's a big steak. It's like this big, right? He's cutting up in individual pieces, and he finishes cutting it up and then disappears, and the food disappears. And all of a sudden it comes out and it's on these plates, and he gave it to us. And the reason why I'm telling you that is he took the time to cut up the steak and separate the sides and put it on a platter for us to eat. And I don't know, there was just something very telling about the kind of person he is and the personality that he has, that he took the time to cut up steak for us because he really enjoyed what he did. And he also appreciated the fact that we were there. So it's a little fun story about Rick Bayless. I have a few others that I've had throughout the years, but I'll save those for other podcasts. Speaking of the website, storiesfromthe78.com, I posted a couple cool things. Told you about the new restaurant at the St. Regis. The views are stunning, and that's the picture I'm looking at right now on the website. Tradia, I can't say it. I'm going to stop saying it because I sound like an idiot. But the restaurant, the views are incredible. I'm looking at it right now. You can look out towards Lake Michigan. You see Navy Pier, and it's just these giant glass ceilings that go way up, let all this light in. It's beautiful. So you should check it out and ask them how to pronounce it because God knows I can't. Fuller's Pub. I posted this story. It's a very small story, but you got to check out Fuller's Pub if you want a dive bar in Chicago. It's on Irving Park near Kedzie, but it might be the best dive bar in the city. It's a lot of fun, and you should definitely worth checking out, or at least read the story and download it, if you will, in your brain of when you want to go out and explore the city and dive bars. This is the spot that you want to check out. Another cool thing I did this week is I posted a story about a new way for people to date. So it's called Meet Cute. Have you heard of Meet Cute before? If you've seen the movie The Holiday, they talk about it in there. But Meet Cute is essentially a scene set up for two people to meet, fall in love, and the whole thing. Well, a woman from Chicago wrote this story along with her friend, and they're producing it over at Piper's Alley, where Second City is. And they have a theater there, and they ran it for, I believe, an entire month. And basically, it's like an online dating show that happens in real time, but it's comedy. So you walk in and you sit down in the theater, and they like do the personality tests for people prior to they come. They fill all these things out, and then they pull people up on stage, and that is the show, is them like kind of setting people up with them. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend checking it out. If you go over to the Stories from the 78 website, just type in Meet Cute in the old Google machine, and you'll find the story I'm talking about. It's two people. They were wonderful to deal with. Also posted a story about the Berlin letters, and it's a woman author who wrote these. It's not true, but all the information that she got about it is true. So it's really fascinating if you want to take a look into that and like that time back during World War II. But one of the really unique things that I've done that I did this week that I haven't done in a long time was go and check out some live theater in the city, and particularly in Portage Park, which you don't typically hear about when you're in Chicago. You grow up here, you don't typically hear about Portage Park being a theater hub, but they do have this wonderful theater up that way. And they had Cloudman, and it's puppets, magical thing that's for kids. I'm reading at it right now, so I make sure I get the name of the venue correct. But let me close that because you don't want to see that. The Filament Theater in Portage Park, and Cloudman's still running through there. It's been extended. You need to take your kids if you have young ones. This is a great thing. It's very interactive. Puppets, they walk through the entire space like, I don't know, it's almost like a bird's eye view into what a live like you can see all the like imagine a theater, right? When you only see what's in front of the stage. So imagine there is the stage, but there's no curtain. So you can see the puppeteer like walking with certain things, and they get behind things where you can't see it. So that whole magic thing isn't lost, but it's a very great show. And I would recommend checking that out at the Filament Theater in Portage Park. And it's also at the website. And then a friend of mine, her name is Laura Neary. She's writing a couple stories for me in the last few months. And she has one up there about the Stockyard Bank building. Just a fascinating read if you want to learn about what they're doing and how they're repurposing old buildings in Chicago, because they kind of are careful of like how to preserve these things and make them go forward. Awesome experience dining wise in the West Loop. It's called Nissos Prime. This place is phenomenal. I can't say enough about it. It's a little pricey, I'm not going to lie. But they like do this salt encrusted fish where they light it on fire, and it's a whole thing. And you can see this video if you go to the website, storiesfromthe78.com. I'll stop saying it every 5 minutes, but you go over to the website, you can see the fire. They also have a prosciutto machine where they're just sitting out there and they're just slicing the prosciutto right there in front of you. The steaks are just wonderful. And they have caviar, a little sampling of caviar. I mean, it's a whole, people use this word all the time now, immersive experience. This is a phenomenally great immersive experience. And it's Nissos Prime is the above spot. So when you walk in, you got to go up, you got to make reservations. But it's a wonderful spot right in the West Loop. And I also did this week hosted a meatball eating contest, and that's posted to the site as well. If you've never seen a meatball eating contest, it's not what you think and everything you wish. It's a mess. It's a whole thing, but it's at Bar Roma in Andersonville. If you've never been to Bar Roma, it's a great spot up in Andersonville. The woman that owns is fantastic, and Chef Fred is amazing. The food, the meatballs are like the star of the show, hence why they do the meatball eating contest, and they did it on National Meatball Day. It's phenomenal. You need to go and check that out if you want like a really cool Rome-inspired meal. That place is phenomenal. I was the MC of this event. So I hosted it, and the video is of the event itself. I talked to Chef for a little bit, but it's a whole thing. I recommend doing that. One of the cool things I did also this week, I was asked to go and talk to Sammy Sosa, like the Cub Sammy Sosa. Yeah. He was back in town. He was doing something for an organization that I can't think of at the moment at the top of my head. He was also doing like a signing over in Rosemont for like a autograph convention thing. And he came in on the Steve Cochran show on WLSAM, and we did a little story. I interviewed him afterwards. They did that story for CBS. And the video I have posted is just one of the answers to the question that Steve Cochran asked, who is the host of the WLS morning show there. But it was bizarre because he, if you don't know anything about Sammy Sosa, the baseball player for the Cubs, he played for the Cubs for a long time. He had a great career with the Cubs. Him and McGuire did their whole thing in '98 where they were chasing the home run record, and McGuire got it. But Sosa still hit tons of home runs after that and before that and the whole thing. But his career in Chicago ended not great. Like he kind of just like, how they say you rather burn out than fade away. Well, he kind of faded away, and he left a sour taste in his mouth about the way he left the team and the whole thing. So we addressed a little bit of that in this video, and that's the clip that I have on the site. So go over there and check it out. It's interesting because he admits that he was up in the clouds in terms of his ego, right? And then he said that, you don't see things for what they are when your head's up in the clouds. So you get that, but then he says other things that are just kind of contradictory to himself. Just take a listen and you'll see what I mean. And then I talked to my buddy Scott Bonn, and he has this amazing podcast that I can only aspire to, but it's called Why We Love Serial Killers. And he did a tour of this podcast live and in person at the City Winery in Chicago. And I talked to him for like a half hour, and we just got lost in all things serial killers. It's fascinating to hear about. And the funny thing is that most of his fans or the people that follow this podcast are women, which makes up a huge portion of the listening audience for him. It's all about the women and why, and understanding like the reasoning for serial killers and why they do what they do and the whole thing. So Scott Bonn is the podcast. I suggest checking it out just because it's a very fascinating topic, and he gets into, Jeffrey Dahmer, Gacy, TBK, the whole thing. It's fascinating. So that's also on the site, and we like deep dove, whatever. We took a deep entrance into the world of serial killers, and it was fascinating conversation, and he was so gracious with his time. It was one of my favorite things interviews I've done, and it was a lot of fun. The Art of Grieving is a documentary that my friend Preston did, and it's up on the site as well, and I'll give you a little behind the scenes. So he lost his brother, right? Preston Zeller is his name. He loses his brother. They don't know really what's going on and why. They knew that he had some struggles, and they were like besties, and his brother, I believe, served in the military, and it was just hard, and it changed him. And when his brother passed, Preston wanted to figure out a way to help grieve and honor his brother. So the documentary, The Art of Grieving, is that. And it's about, he gets into painting and he makes this giant mural and he goes through the process of it. So if you want to learn more about something like that, it's a really good thing for people who are dealing with a lot of mental health, how to grieve properly. I think in this society, we don't teach each other how to grieve better. People are just supposed to suck it up, right? Put dirt on it, don't talk about it. And we're better as a society, I think, after the pandemic. And this just kind of exemplifies that. So The Art of Grieving over at the website Stories from the 78. I'm just kind of taking a look here at other things that we did and everything I posted on the website. There's a great new pickleball court in Chicago. It's called SPF. It's the largest indoor pickleball social club in the U.S. currently. That is also up there. Double Clutch Brewing, awesome brewery in Evanston, North Side. But they have these classic cars that are worth millions of dollars. There's a McLaren that they have there that is worth $1 million, and some of them are on display, and the other ones are in a garage off-site. But if you love cars and you're inspired by cars, you just want to be in a place that's all about cars. I mean, the brewery's great, the food is great, and the car collection is amazing. So I would check that out. And finally, I want to finish about burlesque, because can you go wrong with burlesque? Carol Doda was the pioneer of burlesque dancing, and it started in San Francisco. And it's a documentary that came out. And the cool thing is, when they debuted it in Chicago, they also had like burlesque performances ahead of the performances at the Landmark Theater in Chicago in like Lincoln Park. So you have like burlesque dancing, and then you see this documentary about Carol Doda, and it's a really great documentary. Like in general, it's very fascinating. I didn't know all of this stuff happened back then, and all the starts and false starts, like what she did for the burlesque industry shouldn't be overlooked, because it wasn't for her wanting to do it. I don't know if they would have it now, because it was considered, like risque and not appropriate back in the 60s and 70s. And she made it made it an art form to really be looked at that way. So I talked to one of the folks putting on the performance and of the pre-performances, and just in general, a person talking about the documentary and how it inspired the burlesque community. And the whole thing's up there. So you need to go over to the website and just do a deep dive, if you will, at storiesfromthe78.com. I'll come back next week and tell you more random stuff that happens. But those are the highlights this week. So thanks for watching. Website, storiesfromthe78.com. And I'll see you later. Thanks.